Unspoken Issues.
Welcome to another episode of Unspoken Issues. That's right, we are celebrating the recent release of the latest Star Wars film, Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. So, Chris Armstrong, you, sir, went to the Unspoken Decade Facebook page and you put up a poll because there was some Star Wars fever. People were having themselves a Star War, and you wanted to get the input from our Unspoken Decade Facebook fans as to what Star Wars related comic book issue we're going to be talking about tonight. So tell them the two issues that you put up against each other for our fans to pick from.
I wanted to do a couple of Star Wars Dark Horse era comics. They pretty much had the license all through the 90s. And the two probably most famous Dark Horse Star Wars comics are Dark Empire, which was one of the first ones they did, and Shadows of the Empire, which was in the mid-90s, I believe. So I just went, with the first issue of each of those miniseries and put those up as a poll. And it started out nip and tuck, but pretty quickly Dark Empire started to take the lead and kind of ran away with it.
This was a pretty quick poll, too. I think we only had it up there for like 3 days, if that. Right. And because we wanted to obviously get the episode in. But for that small amount of time and the amount of Star Wars fans that are out there that are also comic book fans, we ended up with over 100 votes on this.
Yeah.
So
probably the most we've had on any of our polls.
I think so. Shadows of the Empire comes in at 37 votes. So now, I never read Shadows. I've heard of it. I've heard of the game. I've heard of some of the other things that were involved with this, but I've never read it. So was Shadows one that you'd read before?
Yeah, par for the course. I was kind of hoping it would win, and it got obliterated. So as with almost every poll, the one that I was kind of pulling for comes up short. But Shadows of the Empire was essentially a Star Wars movie without the movie. Like, it had everything else. There was a novel. There was a comic book series. There was a toy line. There was a video game. There was a soundtrack that you could buy, a CD soundtrack.
Wow.
Maybe a few other things. So it had everything but the movie. And Shadows of the Empire is set in between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. It takes place in between those two films. And I loved the novel when I was younger. I was probably 15 or 16 when it came out, and I read it and really liked it. I reread it again a couple years ago, and I was like, boy, this is not as good as I remembered it being. But it was still a fun read. And I had read the comic series years ago, but it's been a while. And the interesting thing was, like, the comic series did not follow the same. Like, there were elements in both the comic and the novel, but it had there were other aspects of the comic as well. So you kind of had to read and play everything to, like, get the full story.
Okay.
And I've heard people talk about how this is before the special editions came out, before the prequels came out, and Lucasfilm was kind of testing the waters with how popular Star Wars still was in pop culture, like, because there hadn't been a movie or anything since 1983.
Yeah.
So we're talking about almost 12 or 13 years later.
That's right.
They had started releasing the novels, and then they did this, like, almost as an experiment to see, to kind of test the waters. And then when it was successful, I guess they started moving forward with every. I mean, I'm sure the special editions and the prequels still would have come out, but anyway, yeah. So that came in second, and we're gonna be doing Dark Empire #1.
Dark Empire #1. So Shadows of the Empire, like I said, I never read. I do remember the N64 game. I did not know that. Yeah, that's what I heard. I heard it's like a really good game. I don't remember hearing anything about the toy line, though, which strikes me because I think, of course, this was 96.
I think, that sounds right. 95, 96, right?
Okay. Yeah, and at that point, I think I was in college, so it doesn't surprise me I wasn't paying attention to that. I was paying attention more to video games than I was to toys at that time, so that was probably why I knew of the N64 game. So, yeah, I have little to no knowledge about Shadows of the Empire, which, according to this, the novel was written by Steve Perry, just to kind of throw that name out there, which is not the singer of Journey. So, yeah, but Dark Empire, now that's a different story. Dark Empire, I remember I was at college. I had a few pretty good friends that were really into Star Wars. So I liked the movies just fine. I wasn't a huge fan. I wasn't somebody that was very, I guess I would not say knowledgeable about the lore and all the mythology wrapped into this franchise. but there were people that I knew that did.
Mhm.
So one of those guys was Joe. I'll just call him. His name was, that's his first name. His first name was Joe. Joe lived, Joe was about 3 or 4 doors down in the dorm, and he was a unique dude. Okay, and now that I look at it, I mean, I say he's unique, but he was. If you want to say a redneck, we don't want to call any. We don't want to disparage anybody here, but
I
he
know
was
plenty of rednecks. They used to love it when you call them rednecks.
he
Sound like one, so it's all good.
all right, yeah, we're in good company. Trust me. I remember, he was a big NASCAR fan. He loved wrestling. He was one of the guys that kind of got me back into wrestling.
The boxes, huh?
Yeah, we are checking them. Trust me. Loved wrestling. He loved drinking. I remember him rubbing too. He used to have a rub in his jaw, right in his jaw. And he was in college, but he was one of the biggest Star Wars fans. And he came to me one time after I said, yeah, I like watching the movies and blah blah blah. And he's like, he recognized I was into comics, and he handed me this trade. Mm-hmm. And he said, read this. So he gave me Dark Empire and the trade at that point. So this came out in 91. So the trade obviously had hit, was on the market in 96, 97. So I took it and I read it. This was my first exposure to anything post Star Wars, Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
So I hadn't, I say first exposure. I should say first exposure to any story, because I played plenty of games revolving around Star Wars. I've never read anything that happened after the events of Return of the Jedi. So needless to say, I was like, okay, let's see where this takes me. So yeah, I've read this whole story. Now we're only covering the first issue tonight, but it's it was all in all, the series is good. I enjoyed it. I remember actually liking it. I did cover it on source material way back in the day. I can't even remember what episode it was, but I can tell you that just reading this tonight, I remember some of the things that I said, which were probably not very fair to the artist. I remember having a real big problem with the art in this issue, and I think a lot of that is because it's not the pencils, it's the coloring. Because there's practically nothing there. Yeah. It's all, but I think that's
almost
a stylistic.
Like a watercolor.
Yeah, I think it's a stylistic choice, though, and I can respect that. So now that I'm 5 years after I probably did that podcast, I can respect what they were trying to do. Regardless, so we're talking Dark Empire #1. Before we get to that, though, all right, let's just take another 5 minutes, and I want to talk to you. I want to ask you, Chris Armstrong, tell me about Star Wars in your life.
Looking back, there's really never been a time where I didn't know all about Star Wars. I remember as a young kid, my parents had a old 60s, 70s era projector, home video camera projector.
Yeah, I got you.
Onto a wall or whatever, no sound.
Mm-hmm.
And they had taken it, I guess, to the drive-in and recorded parts of the scene where Luke Skywalker first ignites the lightsaber.
Are you kidding me? Wow. They pirated
it was just like minutes.
Yeah, I got you.
But I would always bug my parents to put that to play, to set up the projector so I could watch that scene.
That's great.
When I was a kid, because we didn't have it on VHS or anything yet.
Yeah.
So this is when I was a really little kid, and then I would rent them from the video store all the time. My brothers would get mad, like, you rented that 2 weeks ago. We're not renting that again. And then I would convince my parents to let me rent all the Star Wars movies again. And it's always been a part of my life. I've seen those movies more than any movie I've ever seen, And, when the prequels came out, I was I was 19 when The Phantom Menace came out, and I loved it. I still love it. I love all those prequels. A lot of people hate those movies. If it's got a lightsaber in it, I'm probably going to like it. But yeah, it's always been a part of my life. I've always enjoyed the movies, the expanded universe novels and stuff. I've read some of those. Some of them are good. I've never really been that big into those. And like with most comics that are adapted from film or television, I usually don't think those work very well. Mm-hmm. And Star Wars is kind of like that too. It's just not the same reading it in a comic book. There are some good Star Wars comics. A lot of the Marvel stuff they've done since they got the license back, some of those are pretty good. Some of the Dark Horse stuff is good. But the movies is where I've always been, the biggest fan of.
I can remember at a very young age, I'm trying to remember what my first interaction with Star Wars was. I'm pretty sure it was Empire. I don't think I remember watching Star Wars first, A New Hope first. I think I watched Empire first, and then I remember catching Return of the Jedi It was my babysitter's house. She had HBO, and Return of the Jedi was on. So I was like 6 or 7 at the time. So I was born in 78, so it'd be 5 when Jedi released in the theaters. So that would make sense. It'd probably be on HBO a couple years after that.
Right.
But yeah, I can remember watching the shows or watching the movies. Then the toys. So just real quick about the toys. I was a G.I. Joe guy. So getting a Star Wars toy, I was usually not going for that because, man, I wanted them points of articulation. I wanted them interchangeable weapons, blah, blah, blah.
They were about the same size, but yeah, the Star Wars toys were pretty plain. There were no elbow joints. They were kind of static.
Yeah. One of the coolest figures I got, and I can remember it stuck with me at least throughout my lifetime when I was playing with G.I. Joes and stuff. But I ended up getting one of Jabba the Hutt. I think it was Jabba the Hutt's guards.
The Gamorrean guards.
They're big, fat, and they have the big tusks, I think. Yeah. Yes. So I had one of them. He came with an axe, if I remember right. I think I could be wrong. But anyway, he even lost. He lost one of his arms at some point. He still stuck around with me. I mean, I still played with the guy. He was always, giving the Joes trouble at some point. But yeah, I can remember the toys, and I didn't go crazy like I know a lot of people do. I know a guy who lives up the road from me. You should see the carded collection that he has hanging on his wall. I mean, you walk down into his basement, and I mean, he is clearly a Star Wars fan just by the amount of carded stuff that he has displayed on the walls of his basement. And I mean, his basement walls are covered with toys. It's amazing to me. I wasn't going that route, unfortunately. I didn't have the money, neither did my mom. So it's like, and I think she may have bought me a couple other figures, but I cannot barely remember what they were. So
I remember having a Rancor when I was a kid. The big monster that Luke fights at Jabba's palace.
Okay, yeah.
And I want to say that because I was 3 when Return of the Jedi came out, so I don't think I saw that one probably until I may have seen it at the drive-in. I don't really remember, but I probably saw it like on HBO, like you said, a few years later. For the first time. And I don't remember what order I watched the movies. And like I said, I have no memory of watching those movies for the first time or even watching them when I didn't know exactly what was going to happen. They're just ingrained in my brain, basically. Like, I'm not a big collector other than comic books. I'm not a big collector of much of anything else. So I've never had a whole lot of the toys. I had some of the toys when I was a kid, but I never had a big collection of stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm a frequenter of auctions, and every once in a while I will see something, like I remember seeing I think it was an indoor playset in box. And then I think there was a Hoth playset as well that it was at an auction, and I was like, man, I'm sure I could pick this up for cheap. But, again, you got to buy that stuff. You got to find a place to store it. What are you going to do? You're going to turn it around and flip it, whatever. But I can remember the first time I owned the movies on VHS, and that was the special editions. My mom got me those special editions for my birthday one year. So I had them on VHS tape at one point.
Special editions that everyone loves.
That's what I hear. So I hear. Nobody complains about them. Nobody does. So anyway, let's go ahead. We'll get into the comic here. Let's talk a little bit about Star Wars Dark Empire #1. Like I said, this came out in 1991. Hit the shelves December 24th. 1991. Hey, look at that.
Just in time.
December 24th, Christmas Eve, 1991. This was written by Tom Veitch, which we've actually talked about here on the Unspoken Issues podcast before. We have not. Well, I don't think we've ever talked about Cam Kennedy. Cam Kennedy is the artist and colorist. Yeah. And then lettered by Todd Klein. And what I thought was funny was the editor, because it's listed here, I thought it was funny. Mm-hmm. The editor is Barbara J. Kessel. Ladies and gentlemen, Kessel. That fits into Star Wars lore a little bit there. All right. Okay, so one of the notes that I have here, I took this straight from the Wikipedia here. This is considered part of the Star Wars expanded universe, the trilogy. The trilogy?
Yeah, I think there are 2 others.
Okay, I know there's
the Dark Empire 2 and 3.
Okay, all right. Well, so the trilogy follows events in the Star Wars franchise 6 years after Return of the Jedi, specifically the after effects. Now, this is important. Specifically, the after effects of Timothy Zahn's Thrawn trilogy. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the novels, the books. I know that the Thrawn trilogy is a big. That's all.
Yeah, that's probably the most highly regarded novels, I think. I read the first two when I was younger. I don't know if I ever even read the third one. I can't remember, but I liked them. Actually, I read Heir to the Empire, which is the first Zahn trilogy book. I read that earlier this year, and I'm about to start reading the second one again, Dark Force Rising. And I noticed that too, that they reference him in some of the back matter of this issue.
Yeah.
But this came out in 91, which is the same year that Heir to the Empire came out. So
oh, really?
Dark Force Rising, I think, came out in 92, and the third one, The Last Command, I think came out in 93.
Okay.
So though the only one that had come out apparently was the first one at this point.
Okay. All right.
So it kind of has me wondering, like, where this takes place in the chronology. Like, does it take place between Heir to the Empire and Dark Force Rising? I mean, I don't think it really has anything to do with the storylines that are going on in those books. Like you said on the Wikipedia, it says that it takes place after, right?
Yeah. It's supposedly the after effects of Timothy Zahn's Thrawn trilogy. So I don't.
Maybe they were just careful not to spoil anything in this book, and as far as how it relates.
What actually is going to happen? Okay.
The novels, yeah, because I'm pretty sure those novels had not come out yet.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead, and when I do the synopsis, I'm just going to let you guys know I'm reading straight from the crawl of our first page. I'll read that, and then I'll get into the summary of the book, and then we'll talk about what we thought here of Star Wars Dark Empire. The deaths of Darth Vader and the Emperor and the destruction of the second Death Star, the Rebel Alliance proclaimed a new republic over 3/4 of the galaxy. But without the thousands of Jedi Knights who formed the backbone of the old Republic, the new Confederation was a precarious one. Long years of struggle ensued, during which the Imperials regained strength, pushing back the Alliance until the majority of worlds, including the vital Imperial system, fell once again under the Imperial control. Then, without warning, civil war erupted, as factions within the Imperial Navy battled the former Emperor's ruling circle for control of the Empire. The rebels seized the opportunity to sow confusion among the feuding Imperials, using captured Star Destroyers to conduct hit-and-run sorties into the war zones. One such raid over the raging Imperial City battleground ended in disaster. The Alliance Star Destroyer Liberator, commanded by Luke Skywalker and Lando Calrissian, crashed on the planet's surface. Only Luke's skillful use of the ship's deflector shields and anti-grav braking system prevented all aboard from being killed. As our story opens, Princess Leia Organa and her husband, Han Solo, together with the Wookiee Chewbacca and the protocol droid C-3PO, are on a daring mission to rescue their fallen comrades. So, like we said, Luke and Lando crash a Star Destroyer right into the heart of Imperial City. And the civil war is raging on around them between the Imperials and forces loyal to the Emperor's inner circle. Han finds Lando and their forces and rescues them, but Luke has gone off as he believes the dark side is still very powerful in this city. Shortly after catching up, scavengers hop aboard the Millennium Falcon and begin to take it apart. As they unleash a pack of cybernetic dogs against the heroes, things seem dire until Luke appears and helps his friends. But it is when an Imperial Walker appears that we see how a true Jedi Master can wield the Force at his will, as he brings the Walker to the ground by himself. Luke then asks his friends to leave as he plans to investigate what is using the power of the dark side here in the city. Just then, a large ship drops out of hyperspace above the planet, beaming up a large amount of debris, including R2-D2 and Luke Skywalker. Han Solo, Leia, Lando, and their forces leave. However, Leia is troubled with the fact that during the short time she was able to talk to Luke, she actually felt fear. All right, next. Devastator of Worlds. So, oh yeah, by the way, this one was titled, I had a title, The Destiny of a Jedi. All right, well, hey, you're the Star Wars fan. You're the guy.
I think I told you before that I had read this years ago, probably damn near 20 years ago, probably at this point. I read like a trade, and I wasn't like blown away with it, especially because of how much hype I had heard about it. But I did like it. You know, it's pretty good. It's just not like one of my favorite Star Wars, stories. The art, I probably didn't like it the first time I read it, I would guess. I feel like I'm a little more appreciative of like different art styles now than I was when I was younger. It is the color choices are a little odd in a lot of places, especially. But overall, I like the pencils a lot. The battle scenes and like just the wreckage everywhere is really striking. So I do like the art overall. It does have there's some oddities here and there, but but yeah, there's not a whole lot of meat on the bone as far as this first issue. It just kind of sets things up, I think, for where it's going with Luke and where, because I mean it's really Luke's story and his like
temptation.
Yeah, his temptation toward the dark side. Spoilers, but like, you know, we see the Emperor show up later in the series, or a clone of the Emperor trying to bring Luke over to the dark side and whatnot. But yeah, the key point here was probably Luke's facing off with the Imperial Walker, which is, you know, a huge behemoth of a war machine, and he's able to take it down with his newfound Jedi might, basically.
Yeah, dude. Everybody's on pins and needles. Where's Luke? Where's Luke? Where's Luke? And I'm sure the reader's the same way. It's like, oh man, where's Luke at? What's going on? And then when he shows up, I mean, we don't get to see that in the movies. We don't get to see how powerful he is. We see inklings of it. You know, we see inklings as he's learning the Force. He's learning how to raise the X-Wing out of the swamp in Dagobah. You know, we see those inklings in his battle with his father. But then he shows up here, and man, is he a changed dude.
Yeah, he's more like the Jedis of old at this point.
You know, this Imperial Walker like fires at him, and he just ricochets the shots back at the Walker, and then it's trying to figure out. It's so funny because they say this in the book. It's trying to figure out what to do next, and then Luke's just like squish. He brings the thing down, and wow.
Yeah, it looks great. Because Luke is just kind of standing there watching it, kind of like an action hero walking away from an explosion and not reacting. That's kind of the vibe Luke is giving. Like,
he is definitely one powerful dude here. What are your thoughts on Han Solo here? His characterization. Did he feel like the Han Solo we knew in the movies?
Yeah, for the most part, Han is my favorite Star Wars character. I don't think I'm in the minority there. I think a lot of people probably have that point of view. And yeah, he's pretty much himself.
He's given C-3PO like a hard time there, of course.
Yeah,
like he usually does. So that's definitely in character. How about Leia, Princess Leia? What'd you think of her character here? I mean, she's changed a little bit. You obviously get the sense of that. She's clearly more powerful in learning the ways of the Force. That's mentioned. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's showing a lot of concern for Luke, who has kind of, like you said earlier, she's scared for him and intimidated, I guess, by him. And she can sense that like something's not right with him. They reference, that she has Jedi twins.
Yeah, the twins.
At this point, I think she's had the children by this point. Her and Han are married now, and they've got the kids. But yeah, again, not a whole lot that I can say about it, just because like there's not much. This is mostly an action issue. And setting up, Luke's journey for where he goes from here. So it's not out of character for Leia at all. Speaking of Han, there was a moment, I'm trying to find it as I thumb through the pages here, where he has a line of how, whatever you're going through, we'll be right here. We'll have your back. We'll be right here with you. And it's
right at the end.
It seems a little hokey for Han to be saying something like that, even though at this point he's not the same character we met in episode 4, A New Hope, where he has kind of changed his ways, where he's more of a standard hero rather than an anti-hero and whatnot. But it does ring a little hokey for Han to be saying stuff like that.
Yeah, I've got it here. He's talking to Luke, and Luke is like, yeah, there's a very evil force out there. You guys need to get out of here.
Mine was, I think I got it here, where he says he's telling him to leave, and Han basically says, whatever this thing is, we'll be right beside you, kid, blasters blazing.
Yeah. Well, I take that as these guys have been through so much. We watched them go through the 3 movies. They've developed this bond. Mm-hmm. Now Luke and Leia, or excuse me, Han and Leia are married, and I'm sure Han feels like a part of that family. They got kids. He's settled down, man. He's finally sowed his oats, I guess. Is that the word? He was sowing his oats at one point. Now he's done doing that, and he's sticking up for family. Yeah, he's settled down. He's sticking up for family. But I at least I thought that's where he was going there with that, because that's the one line that does stick out to me, where he was saying, we'll be right there, and Luke's like, no, you need to get the hell out, because there is some bad stuff on the way.
Yeah.
And even Leia's like, we need to be together to face this together, and he's like, no, we cannot do that, because your destiny is not mine, and vice versa. So Yeah, I'm trying to. I mean, just like you said, this is mostly an action issue. Best part being the facing.
Walker.
Yeah, facing the walker. Yeah, I mean, really, just like you said, we're getting welcome back to our characters here. Nothing seems too out of the ordinary. Luke definitely seems darker. I guess I would say he's more powerful, but he definitely has that, like, he has seen some stuff. And especially he's been there, like he mentions he's in the Imperial City. And he's like, I think he says that he found some relics or something there. He's clearly of the mind of the Jedi now. He understands the evil that's out there. That's going to turn a man when you understand that. The only other
when
thing,
he first shows up, he's in silhouette. Purposefully, he's got the cape, but like in the silhouette, you see him in the shadows. It's got like the Vader helmet. Is what it kind of looks like. It almost looks like, is that Darth Vader in there?
Yep.
When he's kind of waving his hand out, like destroying some of the droids and whatnot.
You got a good point there, because
And
that's
it's kind of foreshadowing the test he's about to go through.
Foreshadowing in the shadows. That's pretty crazy. There's the only other thing I had on here was, and you know what? When you look at Luke's face, like when you get a real good close up look at his face, man, he almost looks tired.
Yeah, weathered.
Yes, he's definitely somebody. I mean, this is war they've been in. They just talked about how Luke and Lando have been, running this Alliance Star Destroyer for quite a while, and war takes its toll on a man. Doesn't matter how young you are. I'm sure that it does. But okay, so the only other thing I had about this issue is that the Millennium Falcon lands. Okay, and like within 15 minutes. There are people on top of it trying to take it apart. This is something that actually goes through to The Mandalorian here recently, which I have watched.
Exactly, yeah.
Now, granted, the people that did that were kind of known for doing that, but regardless, it's so funny that they turn around and they're like 6 people on top of the Millennium Falcon. They're not like going after. Yeah, they're just stripping it. It's like, you left your car in the bad part of town, which this is definitely the bad part of town.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
some pretty gnarly Cyborian battle dogs.
Oh, the Necks, I think, is what they were called. Necks.
Which is it's cool whenever, constantly in Star Wars films and other media, they're always introducing new elements as far as like races, species, and stuff like that. So this is a nice addition. I don't know how often these type of creatures ever show up again besides this series, but they're pretty cool looking. They almost look like pit bulls, but kind of like lizard-like as well. And then almost look like they've got like helmets on. I guess that's what their heads are shaped like.
Yeah, well, they say did I say cybernetic earlier?
I don't know. It says here Cyborian, so I'm assuming that's the planet that they're from.
Oh crap! If I said cybernetic, I gotta look at my. They
do kind of look. They do kind of look like they are enhanced by mechanically enhanced and whatnot.
My copy says, as they unleash a pack of cybernetic dogs. My bad, ladies and gentlemen. Cyborian battle dogs. But yeah, hey, look, they have some stuff on there. It looks electronic to me. So there you go. Got some virtual reality masks or something. I don't know. The only other thing I kind of had here was the back matter. We had those 4 pages of back matter in issue 1. And they really do a job on, like, okay, if you pick this up, they understand, like, if you are just like the casual Star Wars fan like I am, they need to catch you up on some history as to what's happened between Jedi and now. And they also have to, if you're not a casual fan of Star Wars and you were just, some guy off the street who picked up this comic, you have no idea who these characters are. They give you a good introduction as to who they are and where they're at this point in history. The Grand Admiral Thrawn is mentioned back. Yep, he's mentioned back there. They do a good job of catching you up on some of the events that happened in 4, 5, and 6, specifically between Luke and Darth Vader and the Emperor. They talk a lot about. This was interesting because, and I'll read a little bit about this. I got to find it first, though. Powers of the Jedi. So now I know that a Jedi is pretty powerful. That's easy. Okay, that's pretty easy. I know the Force. Anybody who's anybody that's watched Star Wars wishes they had the powers of the Force. Just so you, if anything, you could get the remote sitting on the other couch.
Exactly. If nothing else, it's good for that.
So, but man, when I was reading the powers of a Jedi in this, holy crap, there is some stuff in here that I did not realize how powerful. At least a master of the Jedi, a master Jedi could do. So I want to read some of these things. All right, clearly we talked about him taking down an Imperial Walker. We've seen that in the movies, or at least we can see that he has used the Force to manipulate gravity and whatnot. Okay, so that's something that I have no problem taking that into account and saying, oh man, that's freaking awesome, way to go. Now. Here is, all right, he knew the moment, this is talking about Luke, he knew the moment to strike with the lightsaber and the moment to step back. He could navigate a ship by instinct alone. He could do astounding feats of acrobatics and make incredible leaps. He had the ability to withstand great pain, fatigue, hunger, and thirst. He could transfer a portion of his life energy to another and accelerate healing in himself and others. That's pretty cool. And with a word or gesture, he could create thoughts and feelings in the weak-minded, sometimes even in the minds of the strong. All right? These are not the droids you're looking for. Understood. All right. Instead of growing proud as he acquired greater knowledge and skill, Luke Skywalker became more unpresuming. He recognized that he drew his strength not from himself, but from the energy of life itself, and he became aware that he had just begun to plumb the depths of the possible. For it is said, the ancient Jedi Knights, including Master Yoda, had many more skills than these. Even the power to manipulate the molecular structure of the universe, to live beyond death. Now, okay, I've seen that. And to guide the path of humankind in righteousness. And there lies the key. For a true Jedi, no matter how far he progresses, does not use his power for its own sake, but for personal ends, but for the good of others. So, manipulating the molecular structure of the universe. Now, everything else, I was like, okay, all right, wow, okay, well, oh my gosh, he could do that. And then I got to that, and I was like, holy crap. So the Force just isn't moving things. The Force just isn't kind of like pushing somebody, this way or that. Man, that's some really heavy stuff. Now,
cite some examples, guys. I don't know. I don't understand what that even means, really.
So I've watched all the movies I haven't watched the most recent one. I think one of the coolest images of the newest trilogy was right there at the beginning, where I think it was Finn or somebody shoots at
Kylo Ren.
Yeah, and Kylo stops that bolt in midair.
Yeah,
that was awesome. So a true Jedi Master being able to do all these other things is just. It just grows that myth that much more amazing. And again, just like you said, side examples. I don't know if they did. I don't recall them really. Oh man, Last Jedi. I guess closest thing maybe would be Princess Leia. Practically freezing in space, and that was almost like that right there. Was almost a reach for me. I remember when I was watching, I was like, oh, okay. Well, now reading this, I'm like, well, shit. Makes sense now. She can do that. I mean, no problem.
There are things. This is obviously written in 1991.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
And this, the Dark Empire, along with all the other expanded universe novels and comics and stuff, is no longer canon.
Yep.
According, by decree of Disney. But reading this actually, I don't want to throw any spoilers out there for the new movie or anything, but. That phrase, manipulate the molecular structure of the universe. There are things like The Last Jedi and The Force Awakens, like those movies added to the Force powers. Like in The Force Awakens, he freezes the blaster bolt. That's something we've kind of seen before. Darth Vader did that to Han Solo in The Empire Strikes Back. He blocked his blaster.
Yep.
But he also used the Force to knock Rey out unconscious, and so he could take her aboard the ship. And he would use the Force to draw information out of Poe Dameron's head. Like those weren't things that we saw in the old movies. And then in The Last Jedi, there were more advancements. And in a way that's kind of seems lazy, like lazy writing. Like, oh, well, if this Force user needs to do something, so we'll just say the Force can do it. but it's a fantasy world, so
Yeah.
it's going to be stuff like that.
Yeah.
Even though this information here that we're reading about doesn't really apply to the new canon or whatever, that phrase, manipulate the molecular structure of the universe, kind of is something that, being something that Jedi can do, makes sense with the new movie.
So it's, even though this is supposed to be out of canon, this is clearly could potentially be an in-canon explanation.
Sure.
Okay. All right. So, I was thinking about, we also have all the books that are outside of, that at least came before this. I don't know. I mean, obviously you said the Thrawn trilogy was one of the most well-known, and clearly they're referencing it here.
Yeah. Dark Empire and Heir to the Empire were basically the first. I'm not sure if Dark Empire was the first Dark Horse comic, but it was one of the first. And outside of the films and the novelizations and the Marvel comic from the 80s, there hadn't been any Star Wars since, besides the movies. When Heir to the Empire came out, when Dark Empire came out, there was Splinter of the Mind's Eye as well, which was a novel that came out after the first movie. But there wasn't like a plethora of Star Wars stories out there. There was the comic that Marvel did that went, I think, 75, 80, maybe it got to issue 100. And then there were a few novelizations, and then that was pretty much it until Lucasfilm started getting back into the business of making, the novels and the Dark Horse comics.
Mm-hmm. Well, not for nothing. I mean, like I said, it's a good first issue. It kind of leaves us on a cliffhanger there at the end. I mean, what is this thing that came out of hyperspace? I don't even know if we get a good look at it. We just know that this ship drops out of hyperspace, and then all of a sudden stuff just starts getting sucked up into it.
Right. There's like it's like an energy cloud, basically.
Yeah. And up goes Luke, and up goes R2-D2, his faithful droid. And where are we going to go to next? What's next? You have to find issue 2, find the trade and read it. Anything else on the issue 1 here of Dark Empire?
No, I think I pretty much said everything. I kind of wish I had picked a late, like maybe issue 6 or a later issue, just because it felt like, even though this is a cool issue and I enjoyed especially a lot of the art with the rendering of the spaceships and like the carnage on the ground battle, there wasn't a whole lot of meat to it. It was mostly just some action and some setup for where the story was going. But still, it was way better than I remembered it being, because I didn't remember it being all that good. And now I'm going to have to go back and read, I guess, the rest of the series.
All right. Taking a look over at our Facebook page there, the Unspoken Decade Facebook page. James Purcell chimed in, and I'll read this to you. Get your thoughts if you have any. It says, Dark Empire is one of the best post-film Star Wars stories ever, up there with the Thrawn trilogy. In those early expanded universe Wild West days when creators were going nuts with ideas. Art by legend Cam Kennedy is no small thing either. Shadows of the Empire is cool, but the comic isn't a patch on the novel it's based. So you kind of mentioned that, right? Like it didn't have... You had to kind of experience all these things together to kind of get a good idea of what happened, or... Well,
I think that it was designed where you could kind of pick and choose what media you wanted to consume, but if you wanted to get the full experience, you kind of had to do everything.
And I can't do anything but agree with the fact that this is probably one of the best post-film Star Wars stories ever, because I can't say that I've read anything else. I'm trying to think from me. I'm trying to think if I actually read anything after this. That I know I read Dark Empire 2. I did at some point read that, and for the life of me, I can't remember what happens. Now, Chris Childs, he says Shadows, so he must have voted Shadows of the Empire. It was a huge event when it happened. I mean, do you remember Shadows being like a big event, or what was the deal? Like, obviously you said there was so much, it was almost like they were trying to do a movie without the movie. And maybe that's what he's referencing there. Was there any other fanfare or anything that you can remember that tied around Shadows?
It's hard for me to say, because I was kind of unplugged from nerd culture at this point, because this landed in the time period where I wasn't buying comics. I wasn't at comic shops. The internet existed, but I wasn't online. So it's hard for me to really say. I'm sure he's right. I just remember that when the book came out, however it was, probably in a magazine, I found out about it and immediately, got a copy of it and read it. And it wasn't until later that I had read the comic, and I think I knew that there was a soundtrack like a CD soundtrack at the time. And of course, I knew about the video game. My cousin had an N64 and he had the game, and we played it. Played the hell out of it. So,
Man.
But as far as it being like a big pop culture event, I'm sure he's right. I didn't experience it that way, just because I just wasn't plugged into it as much at that point.
I'm on the Wikipedia right now just to kind of see if I can find anything that kind of sticks out to me. So it says in the background, and this is some of the stuff you've already mentioned, but it says in 1994, Lucasfilm publishing director Lucy Autry Wilson met with Bantam editor Lou Aronica to discuss future publications, and Aronica suggested a Star Wars crossover multimedia event. Later in the year, Lucasfilm met with franchise licensees, including LucasArts representatives and author Steve Perry, to discuss the multimedia project, intended to feature the media and marketing elements of a film release without actually producing a movie. This was largely meant to reinvigorate the franchise ahead of the prequel trilogy, along with George Lucas's 1997 special editions of the original trilogy. Lucasfilm producers originally wanted the film to focus on the main characters between Star Wars and The Empire Strikes Back, but Dark Force's game designer John Knowles suggested that it take place between the later film and Return of the Jedi. So, and as that was an era explored by no other Star Wars novel. Could you imagine being a Star Wars fan at this point in time, like a huge Star Wars fan, and just you see them gearing up to like bring the story forward, but not have a movie? I imagine that probably upsets some people. Are like, come on, let's, why do we have all this out there and no movie? That would hurt my feelings a little bit. If we could at least take another step.
I mean, I can only speak for myself. I never looked at it that way. I just thought, look at all this cool stuff.
Yeah.
A novel about this time, and a video game about this time. The idea of a new Star Wars movie, like, it didn't even seem like that was ever going to happen. This is before the prequels or the special editions. The special editions may have been announced by this point, because I remember it was announced years ahead, because I had heard rumors about it before I actually knew that it was officially going to happen or whatever. But like a new Star Wars movie with an original, not the special editions, but like the prequels and everything, just it seemed like something that was never going to happen in the mid-90s.
In 1996, Return of the Jedi radio drama by Brian Daley makes several references to Shadows of the Empire. That's pretty interesting. Huh. There were Topps trading cards, dude.
Oh, I got to get some of those.
Topps trading cards. The Kenner action figures included Boba Fett versus IG-88, Chewbacca and Bounty Hunter with Bounty Hunter disguise, Dash Rendar with heavy weapons pack.
Oh, there's the man.
Yeah. Leia and Bausch disguise with blaster rifle and bounty hunter helmet, Luke Skywalker in Imperial Guard disguise with taser staff weapon, and Prince Xizor, or
Xizor, I believe is how.
Xizor, there we go. Prince Xizor with energy blade shields and, I guess, a special 2-figure set of Prince Xizor versus Darth Vader.
Mm-hmm.
Kenner vehicles such as the Outrider apparently were made, Slave One, and Swoop Bike. Look at that. Taking you back to the 90s with some Kenner action figures. Oh, man.
Yeah, I really want an Outrider. I don't really collect toys. I don't have very many, but yeah, I don't know how much you know about Dash Rendar. Dash Rendar was one of the main characters in the game.
Yes, I remember that name.
He's basically a Han Solo stand-in, because Han Solo was frozen in carbonite between those two movies, so he wasn't in the story.
Okay.
So they brought in basically Han Solo light, and his name's Dash Rendar. He has a ship that's pretty similar to the Millennium Falcon, that's what the Outrider is. And I didn't know until a few years ago that they had produced. I knew that they had made toys for Shadows of the Empire. I didn't know they had made a vehicle. So they're kind of hard to get. Like, I think you can get them on eBay, but they're not cheap. But eventually, I want to try and get one.
I wonder what I'm trying to remember what an Outrider looks like. I'm going to pull up a picture. Outrider.
While you're looking that up, the new Star Wars series that's about to start, they did, I think, 50 issues, maybe more. But the most recent series is just ending, and it's set between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, and the next series is supposed to be set between Empire and Return of the Jedi. And so I've got my fingers crossed that there will be some Shadows of the Empire elements in that series.
Yeah.
I don't know if it will be or not, but
that Outrider looks different, man. I mean, I can see the influence of the Millennium Falcon on it, though. Definitely.
Yeah,
all
you
right.
saw that in the game as well on one of the.
Oh, really?
I think so.
It's been forever. I don't know if I played that game or watched people play it, but I remember hearing all sorts of talk about it. This is a 90. My goodness, this was early 64. The early 64 days, right? Yeah,
it probably would have been it might have been one of the launch titles.
Yeah, I recall. I think my buddy, he picked up. He had a choice. You know how expensive those freaking 64 games were. He had a choice of what to get. Plus, he ended up getting Mario Kart because we had gone into college, and when you got the 64, you only got one controller, even though it had 4 ports. So he ended up getting Mario Kart and a spare controller. And boy, were our days wasted from there on out. Gosh, so many nights I should have been studying. So many nights I was dropping some questionable question marks right there on the track. All right. Loved it. Oh, man. Great stuff. So one more comment here from Robbie Bragdon. He says that Cam Kennedy artwork, though, and I assume he's bragging on Cam Kennedy. So I agree. Again, this is the coloring. Like I said, the coloring was stylistic, and the art itself, it does. If you just pick the pencils apart, it looks good. I think it looks really good. So I guess, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get into plugs. But before I do that, just see if we got anything on the Unspoken Decade for Star Wars. And then we'll just hit the search bar. Star Wars.
Nothing but Star Wars.
Well, does not see anything. There's no tags in there that say Star Wars. Mm-hmm. Ladies and gentlemen, for all of your 90s comic book needs, go check out the Unspoken Decade, read some articles, be entertained, and don't forget to give the Facebook page, Unspoken Decade Facebook page, a like, and then watch for a new poll that should be dropping here pretty soon. We will be doing something, and you will have input. You will be able to pick at the issue that we will be discussing, so keep an eye out for that. Chris Armstrong, my man, let's get into plugs, sir. What would you like to plug?
Not a whole lot. You can follow me on Twitter at BrodyMan34, and sometimes you can hear me on Jesse's podcast. He'll probably be mentioning that in a moment. Mm-hmm. And then I've got some stuff up on the UnspokenDecade.com, so you guys should check that out. A lot of cool stuff for 90s comics fanatics.
That's right. That is right. Yes, I do a podcast right here on the Rattlich in Broadcasting Network, the network that hosts Unspoken Issues. My podcast is called Source Material, and we just pretty much take a book, take a look at a story arc, and we talk about it. We read the story arc, give you a synopsis, and then we discuss our feelings, how much it touched us. And some other fun stuff, a little bit of history thrown in. Recently, I think we did, speaking of Star Wars, it should be airing this coming Monday. We did our discussion on the Lando series. So this was the one that just released, I think in 2015, maybe it was 2017. But anyway, so some of the new Star Wars stuff there. And it was an interesting discussion because this series took place shortly before, I'm pretty sure it was before Empire, possibly A New Hope. But let's just put it this way: Lobot can talk, and I had no idea. At least he could talk at the beginning of this series. But anyway. So, yes, thanks again to the Rattlich Broadcasting Network for hosting us. Ladies and gentlemen, if this airs before Christmas, we hope that you have a very Merry Christmas. Happy holidays, anything that you celebrate. We appreciate you coming here and listening to us jibber-jabber for an hour or less, however many minutes this podcast is. But in the meantime, we will be catching you probably in a couple weeks with a new comic book from the 1990s to discuss. So, for Chris Armstrong, I am Jesse Starcher. We'll catch you next time. Have a great holiday. Bye-bye.
May the Schwartz be with you.
Perfect. I see your Schwartz is as big as mine.